Just $1. $1 to claim the horse that the farmer has protected for years, a creature he values more than his own life. But behind this transaction lies more than just a simple deal. It harbors a dark secret, a buried past, and an unexpected meeting that no one could have foreseen. A battle between a wealthy, powerful billionaire and a humble farmer. Can $1 truly buy 20 years of silence, or will it uncover terrifying truths never before revealed? What shocking conclusion awaits when the past and its secrets are exposed? Join us as we delve into this story of friendship, forgiveness, and how one man can liberate himself from the haunting shadows of his past. Let's begin this journey of discovery right now. The sky above Redstone Valley was a dull gray, stretched out like a massive blanket, allowing only faint slivers of light to break through the horizon, almost as if the stars themselves were about to vanish. A soft breeze swept through the dry grass, the gentle rustle breaking the eerie stillness in the air. Under the dim light of dawn, where time seemed to stand still, John Walker stood quietly in the vast, open field. He was a middle-aged man, rugged and quiet, his thin frame marked by years of hard labor beneath the unforgiving sun. He didn't need to speak much, nor did he seek attention. His life was tied to the land and the work, to the long, tiring days, and sometimes the lonely nights spent with only the darkness and the sounds of crickets for company. But the one thing that kept him going, the one constant in his world, was Shadow, the jet-black horse standing beside him. Shadow was more than a horse. It was a loyal companion, a friend who walked beside him through the loneliest moments of his life. Shadow was a rare horse. Its coat, dark as the night, gleamed faintly under the weak light of dawn. Its body was strong and balanced, with long legs that moved with quiet grace, as if it had conquered every challenge life had thrown at it. The faint scars on its body told stories of past battles, of storms weathered alongside John. Its eyes, deep and steady, seemed to understand its owner's soul. Without words, Shadow knew when John needed comfort, when he simply needed a quiet companion standing beside him. On mornings like this, with everything still lingering in the mist, John and Shadow simply stood there, sharing the peaceful space without uttering a word. Shadow lowered its head to graze, the motion so gentle, as if it were telling John that everything was fine. And John stood there, eyes half closed, letting memories from the past flood back, each image like a wound in his heart. But today, everything would change. The sound of a car's engine grew louder from a distance, shattering the quiet peace. Michael Graves appeared from the end of the road, his sleek black SUV rolling through the dusty air. The long shadow of the car fell across the field, accentuating the stark difference between the stranger and the world around him. He stepped out of the vehicle, a billionaire dressed in an immaculate suit, his hair perfectly styled, shoes gleaming like he owned the world. He was in no hurry. Every step he took was deliberate, calculated, like a man who controlled everything around him. Graves didn't look at John. His eyes were fixed on Shadow. His gaze scanned the horse, appraising it as if it were just another expensive item in his collection. He looked at it impassively, as if it were no more than a thing to be bought, not a living creature. He spoke, his voice smooth but cold. "I want to buy this horse." John didn't respond immediately. Those words weren't a request, they were a statement, something Michael Graves believed was as simple as nodding and owning what he desired. He stood there, barely acknowledging John, his attention solely on Shadow, cold and unfeeling. John steadied him, an unsettling sense rising in his chest. The years of hard work, raising Shadow from a colt, all the memories of the days they had spent together, were now reduced to a mere $1. Graves continued, his arrogance palpable, pulling a single dollar bill from his jacket pocket, raising it like it was the most precious thing in the world. $1. Graves said, a smirk curling at the corners of his lips. "This is the price I'll pay." John felt a surge of anger rise up inside him. $1. His entire life had been tied to Shadow, protecting it through hardships, and now a single dollar was all it was worth in the eyes of this man. But what angered him most wasn't the amount, it was the way Graves looked at his horse, as if it were nothing more than an object, something that could be bought and sold. Graves didn't just want to buy the horse. He was here to control, to drag John back into a past he had tried to forget. Graves had come for another reason, a reason John couldn't yet see. The secret from the past had been buried for so long, and now, with a single dollar, Graves wanted to dig it up, expose everything. Could $1 really pay for everything? Or was this just the beginning of a confrontation John never could have imagined? Graves stood there, the cold dollar bill in his hand. John couldn't take his eyes off it, a sense of offense rising in his chest. But in that moment, he realized one thing that could help him face whatever came next: Shadow. With the horse by his side, memories of the years they had shared, the moments of joy and sorrow, flooded back. As the winds from the valley swept through, carrying a light dust with it, John Walker stood still in the quiet, his gaze fixed on Shadow, the only friend he had left in this world. Their bond wasn't just a simple connection between a man and his animal, it was a symbol of absolute loyalty. It was a friendship not spoken, but one that existed in every step Shadow took, in every breath, and in every decision John made. John didn't need to say anything. Shadow, with its large head and deep eyes, seemed to always know when John needed comforting, when he needed a silent friend by his side. During the long, exhausting days, Shadow was more than just a creature in his life, it was the continuation of his very existence. During the quiet, lonely nights, when darkness seemed to envelope everything, Shadow became the only light in John's heart, the only belief he had when the world around him seemed to collapse. The simple moments shared between John and Shadow were deeply profound. Each morning, amidst the chill of the early winds, John could feel the warmth of Shadow's breath as the horse gently nuzzled his shoulder. It was an unspoken gesture, but anyone who witnessed it could feel the closeness, the profound bond between them. Sometimes, just a look, just a light touch from Shadow was enough to soothe the pain in John's heart. On the long nights, when everything sank into silence, Shadow stood by his side, eyes bright and watchful, ready to protect John from the shadows of his past. John gently stroked Shadow, his thin hand gliding over the horse's smooth, dark coat. In that moment, it felt like the world vanished. There was no sound, no words, only the merging of two souls, one human, one animal. John didn't need to explain anything. Only Shadow could help him weather these emotional storms, only Shadow could bring him peace, if only for a fleeting moment. On the quiet nights, when everything around seemed to pause, memories of Emma flooded John's mind, like a wound that would never heal. He remembered every detail of the day they met, Emma walking onto his farm, her bright eyes sparkling, her smile as radiant as sunlight breaking through the clouds. She loved horses, loved the freedom, and the feeling of controlling such a powerful creature as Shadow. She and Shadow were a perfect pair, moving as one in each gallop, each step they took across the trails, their hearts and rhythms perfectly in tune. Emma laughed brightly, her blonde hair flowing over her shoulders, her face alight with joy as she rode Shadow. The two of them seemed to float across the wide meadows, the vibrant sunset casting a red glow over the sky. Every stride on Shadow's back made Emma feel the pure freedom of a woman unbound, always reaching for her dreams, always chasing the horizon. Emma didn't just love riding horses, she became an essential part of John's world. She was the source of joy and motivation for him, the spark that lit up a life that often felt too dark. In those quiet moments, with only the two of them and the horse, Emma made John feel like nothing was impossible. But everything changed one night. That fateful night when Emma fell from Shadow's back. It was a moment John would never forget. The wind howled across the fields, the frantic sound of the horse's whinny echoing through the air, and Emma's gaze as she fell, her blonde hair swirling in the wind. Emma's death left a deep wound in John's heart, a sorrow that no words could heal. He still remembered the feeling as he rushed to her side, but it was already too late. After that night, everything changed. Not only did John lose Emma, but he also lost a part of his faith in himself. Since then, Shadow had become more than just a horse. It became everything to John, his source of comfort, his refuge whenever the painful memories of Emma returned. Together, they had weathered countless storms, and though Emma's shadow was now gone, it still lingered in John's heart. Although Emma's shadow still haunted John every night, and the comfort from Shadow never wavered, something inside him felt unavoidable. Michael Graves, the man with the cold dollar bill in his hand, still stood there, as if he knew everything. And now, it was the value of that dollar that had pulled John into a confrontation he couldn't have imagined, one not just with Graves, but with his very own past. The shadow of Michael Graves swept into the room like a chilling wave, carrying with it an undeniable allure. He was a man of refined elegance, his silver hair gleaming and his black suit impeccable. With every step he took, he exuded power and an unshakable confidence, yet behind his sharp, cold gaze lay something mysterious. He wasn't just a man, he was a wolf, with dark secrets no one could have anticipated, and this unsettled John from the very first moment they crossed paths. Michael Graves wasn't just a wealthy man, he was a force, with a hidden past tangled in ways that John could never have imagined. The dollar bill in Michael's hand wasn't what terrified John. It was the secrets of the past, the buried memories that Michael had come to unearth. The secret of Emma, the woman John had loved, the one who had passed away in a fateful night, was something John had left behind, something he had willingly forgotten. But now, Michael had returned, bringing with him questions John could no longer avoid. Michael paused in front of John, not in a rush, but simply assessing Shadow with a calculating gaze. The jet-black horse, with its sleek, shiny coat, seemed to sense the presence of the stranger, standing tall and alert, its bright eyes fixated on him. Michael wasn't just looking at Shadow as a horse, he saw it as a piece of the puzzle he was ready to dissect. He stepped closer, saying nothing at first. John felt the looming threat with every step Michael took, as if he were not only controlling the space but also John's mind. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice cold and unsettling. "This horse, it has a scar on its leg, doesn't it?" John didn't respond. He only stared at Michael with a cold gaze, but inside, his heart tightened. He knew about the scar. The scar Shadow had earned that night, when Emma fell. That night, the one John could never forget. Michael knew not only about the scar, but he also knew that Emma had ridden Shadow, like an inseparable part of John's life. Michael continued, his eyes still fixed on the horse, but his voice like a dagger, piercing through John's soul. "I've heard Emma loved riding him. She had an accident while on Shadow, didn't she?" John's gaze darkened, like a storm suddenly brewing inside him. Each word from Michael ignited the memory of Emma, burning like a fire he'd long tried to extinguish. Emma's smile, the look in her eyes when she last gazed at John, all rushed back to him. The sweet, painful memories intertwined, pushing him into a dark corner he couldn't escape. John froze, his lips pressed tightly together, but his heart began to race as though it were trying to break free from an unbearable pain. Michael knew too much, and the realization made John feel trapped. Michael didn't stop there. His voice, calm yet sharp as a knife, sliced through the air. "I know you don't want to remember that night, John. But I think it's time you face it." John could hardly breathe. Those words hit him like a wave, forcing him to confront what he had buried so deep inside his mind. That night, the night Emma fell, the look in her eyes as if she wanted to ask him for something John could never understand. The night Emma died. And now, Michael had returned, dragging those memories back to the surface. John couldn't answer right away. The emotions, the memories, came flooding back. A part of him wanted to break free from Michael's questions, but another part felt like he couldn't escape. He turned away, but Shadow stepped closer, lowering its head, as though it knew exactly how its master was feeling. And in that moment, John realized Shadow wasn't just a horse. It was a part of him, his only true companion, the protector he had never fully acknowledged. The horse stood in front of Michael like an invisible barrier, as if telling John that no matter what happened, it wouldn't let him be hurt again. Michael looked at the horse, but his eyes never left John. He knew that John's pain was the one thing he needed to conquer. And to conquer it, he needed to confront the past that John had spent years trying to bury. As Michael finally walked away, John's determined eyes couldn't pull away from the shadow he left behind. Each question Michael had asked felt like a knife cutting deep into his soul. But in that quiet moment, a thought flashed through John's mind. The truth about Emma and that night still lay hidden somewhere, waiting to be revealed. And now, those secrets could no longer be avoided. John felt his chest tighten as Emma's journal lay open before him. It was the very journal he had stumbled upon in her old room, where memories of her still lingered like a fog in his mind. He hadn't expected that within these pages, secrets about Emma's death and the dark relationships surrounding it would slowly come to light. Each page of the journal seemed like a whisper from the past, a door opening, revealing things Emma had desperately tried to keep hidden. And with every line, John began to realize that everything was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. He read slowly, as if every word was touching his heart, each sentence slowly unraveling the web of secrets. Emma's handwriting appeared faint, like weak beams of light cutting through darkness. Michael always found a way to infiltrate my life. Though she hadn't directly said it, every word in the journal expressed her fear and unease about a man with an unsettling allure, someone Emma couldn't turn away from, but also couldn't fully trust. These words weren't mere notes, they were warnings, a revelation of the darkness that Emma felt she couldn't escape. Michael wasn't just someone coming to buy Shadow, he brought with him a subtle manipulation that Emma had sensed for some time. She never told John about the conversations, the encounters that seemed to always leave her unsettled when Michael was around. Maybe, deep down, Emma had known exactly who Michael was, but she kept it quiet, fearful of the strange threat he represented. John paused, inhaling deeply, feeling his heart tighten with each breath. Michael wasn't just a cold, distant man, he was a manipulator, trying to control every part of Emma's life. The words on the pages confirmed what John had suspected for so long. Emma didn't just love Shadow, she also loved a part of the darkness in Michael. She wrote, "He's not just a friend, he's a part of my past that I can't escape." And then, as he read the final entries, a sense of dread began to rise in John's chest. Emma had written about a third person, someone she was very close to, a shadow in her life that John could never have imagined. He came that night. He was there when I needed help. But I can't tell you, I can't tell anyone. John stared at the journal, those words cutting into him like a fresh wound. A third person? Who could it be? Who in his life, someone he trusted so deeply, could be connected to the night Emma was hurt? The unease grew within him, as if something was about to shatter inside him. Michael Graves wasn't the whole story. Maybe, just maybe, he was only a part of the dark tale that those closest to Emma had woven. That night wasn't just an accident, it could have been a trap, a plan involving someone John had never even considered. John turned the pages, each word sinking deeper into his chest, into his soul. The truth crashed over him, not just about Michael, but about a deeper, more hidden darkness. There was another shadow, someone who had been involved in that night, someone John hadn't suspected. But now, when he looked back, everything seemed to fall into place. The events, the exchanged looks, the strange occurrences, all painted a picture that he had never seen before. Was it someone from his family? Someone Emma had trusted, someone she had loved, and perhaps someone who was behind all of this? A wave of regret swept over John. He couldn't imagine that, while he'd been living his peaceful days, his family had harbored such dark secrets. But the more he thought, the more he realized that these events had been unfolding in the background, and he had been blind to them. And then, something clicked. Michael wasn't the only one Emma had suspected that night. The more John read and thought back on the details in the journal, the more he felt everything slipping away under his feet. There was someone in his family who may have secretly been involved in these events. Someone he had never even thought to suspect. That night wasn't a mere accident. It might have been a plan, a play orchestrated by someone close to him. John stood up from the table, the journal falling to the ground. His hands were trembling. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about Emma, about Michael, now seemed unclear, convoluted, and deeper than ever before. Another shadow, a truth he had never imagined, now stood before him in plain sight. And with Michael Graves' appearance, everything John thought he understood about his past could be about to unravel, exposing a fragile veneer that was about to tear apart. Emma's journal still lay on the table, but John couldn't bring himself to read any further. The secrets had been laid bare, yet they brought him no sense of relief. It felt as though a storm had come, and now it was time to face what had happened. John understood that only one final confrontation with Michael Graves could resolve everything. This battle wasn't just about the secrets, it was a battle with himself, with the things he had tried so hard to forget. The cold, biting wind of Richstone Valley swept through the air, carrying with it the dust and echoes of a past that John could never escape. As the sun began to set, casting a pale orange glow across the distant hills, John Walker stood on the porch of his old home, staring out into the horizon. He could feel it, the weight of the past pressing down on him, squeezing the very life out of him. The shadow of Michael Graves loomed large in his mind, and the impending confrontation seemed both inevitable and unbearable. Shadow, his constant companion, stood beside him, its warm breath visible in the chilly air, comforting John with its presence. But even Shadow's reassuring presence couldn't soothe the storm that raged inside him. The time had come for him to face the one thing he had avoided for so long, his own demons, the mistakes he had buried, and the truths he had been running from. He took one last look at the empty fields, the vast, desolate land that had witnessed the quiet solitude of his life. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Michael was coming, and John knew that he had to confront not just Michael but himself. The years of guilt, pain, and regret had accumulated inside him, and now they were rising to the surface, demanding to be faced. As the sound of a vehicle approaching broke the stillness, John took a deep breath. He had prepared himself for this moment in countless ways, but nothing could truly prepare him for what was to come. Michael Graves appeared at the gate, stepping out of the sleek, black SUV, his sharp suit and polished shoes reflecting the last rays of daylight. He moved with an air of arrogance, his posture rigid and deliberate. John's pulse quickened, but he stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. Michael, with his cold, calculating gaze, approached with the same confidence he always had. There was no fear in Michael's eyes, only a chilling certainty that this was a confrontation John could not avoid. John could feel Shadow at his side, the powerful, loyal horse that had been with him through every trial and every tribulation. As Michael drew closer, Shadow moved in front of John, standing tall and firm, its muscular body blocking the path between them. For a brief moment, the horse became a symbol of protection, its dark, intelligent eyes locking with Michael's, as if to say, "This man is mine to protect." The message was clear: John was not alone, not anymore. Michael paused, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the horse, but he didn't falter. "So, it's come to this, hasn't it?" His voice was cold, calculated. "You're still hiding behind that animal, John. You've been hiding from the truth for far too long." John's grip tightened around the railing. He could feel the weight of Michael's words settling in his chest, but this time, he didn't flinch. Instead, his mind flashed back to all the years he had spent running from his past, to the mistakes he had buried deep inside. He wasn't going to run anymore. Not from Michael, not from the past, and certainly not from himself. "I'm not hiding, Michael," John said, his voice steady. "I've been living with the truth all this time, and I'm ready to face it now." A long silence followed, filled only by the sound of the wind rustling through the dry grass. Michael's smirk faded, replaced by a look of something almost like curiosity. John could see it in his eyes. Michael had been prepared for a confrontation, but he wasn't expecting this. He wasn't prepared for John's strength, the kind of strength that came from confronting the demons of the past instead of running from them. "Do you really think you're ready to face everything you've buried?" Michael asked, his tone more inquisitive now, as though trying to provoke John into an emotional reaction. "You think you can just forgive everything and move on?" John stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Michael's. "Forgiveness isn't for you, Michael," John said, his voice low but unwavering. "It's for me. I've been holding on to this anger for far too long, and it's destroying me. I'm done letting you control my life. I'm done letting the past control me." Michael's expression faltered for just a second, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. But he quickly masked it with his usual cold demeanor. "You think you're the only one with demons, John?" Michael sneered. "You think I'm the one who's been holding you back? You're as much a prisoner of your past as I am." John took another step forward, this time not just physically but emotionally. He didn't need Michael's approval anymore. "I'm not a prisoner anymore," he said. "And neither are you." With those words, something inside Michael seemed to snap. His gaze hardened, and for the first time in their entire confrontation, the mask of arrogance slipped slightly, revealing something raw beneath, a man haunted by his own ghosts. For a moment, John saw it, the same pain he had felt all these years, reflected in Michael's eyes. Michael wasn't untouchable, he wasn't invincible. He was just as broken as John. Suddenly, everything shifted. It wasn't about revenge, about winning or losing. It was about letting go of the past, of the guilt, of the pain. Forgiveness wasn't about what Michael deserved, it was about what John needed. John turned his back to Michael, a deep sense of peace washing over him. Shadow, ever loyal, followed him, its steady presence offering a sense of comfort and protection. Together, they walked away from the confrontation, leaving Michael behind. In that moment, John realized that true strength wasn't found in defeating others, but in finding peace within yourself. He didn't need to destroy Michael to feel whole again. He just needed to forgive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, John and Shadow walked side by side into the fading light, a quiet understanding passing between them. The past was behind him now. The road ahead was open, and for the first time in years, he felt ready to walk it, free, at peace, and unburdened. As he watched Michael Graves' figure fade into the horizon, John felt a shift within himself. The confrontation was over, yet the pain still lingered. However, a part of him felt lighter than it had in years. He knew that while the past could never be changed, there were still countless opportunities ahead to heal. And now, as the last light of the day faded, leaving only the darkness and a sense of peace, he realized it was time to find himself again. As the last vestiges of daylight slipped behind the hills, John stood atop a small rise, Shadow by his side, both gazing out at the fading sun. The world around them had grown still, the wind soft and the air crisp with the quiet finality of the day's end. In this moment, it wasn't just the end of a day, it was the end of a long, painful journey that had stretched across years. John had walked a road full of sorrow, guilt, and unresolved questions. But now, as the shadows lengthened and the sky painted itself in shades of orange and purple, something deep within him had changed. He looked at Shadow, the one constant in his life, the one companion that had stood by him through all the turmoil and heartache. In its steady, calm presence, John found the kind of peace that words could never fully capture. The bond between them was more than just man and animal. It was a silent promise of unconditional loyalty, a reminder that some connections transcended even the harshest of realities. "We made it, old friend," John whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustling of the wind. He reached out, gently running his hand over Shadow's sleek coat, the warmth of the horse's body grounding him in the present moment. The past was no longer something he feared. The anger, the betrayal, the secrets, all of it had been confronted. And in doing so, John had let go. He had chosen to forgive not because others deserved it, but because he needed to free himself from the chains of resentment that had bound him for so long. The journey to this place had been difficult, filled with moments of self-doubt and regret, but now, standing in the twilight with Shadow beside him, John understood that true freedom came from within, from the willingness to heal and move forward. The land stretched out before them, vast and untamed, much like the future that awaited him. The weight of the past no longer felt so heavy. As he looked out at the horizon, John felt the weight of his decisions slip away, replaced with a quiet hope. The mistakes of yesterday would no longer define him. For the first time in a long while, John felt at peace. The final message, the story of John and Shadow, wasn't just about confronting a painful past. It was about the power of forgiveness, the kind of forgiveness that wasn't about forgetting or excusing the wrongs of others, but about releasing the grip the past had on his soul. It was about choosing peace over anger, healing over bitterness, and moving forward in the light of love and truth. John had learned that true freedom came not from seeking revenge or holding on to the weight of old wounds, but from releasing them, from allowing himself to move past the hurt and embrace the life he still had ahead of him. And in doing so, he found that the most powerful thing he could ever give himself was the ability to forgive, not just others, but himself. As the night crept in, John and Shadow stood side by side, together at last, in a world that, while still full of unanswered questions and lingering shadows, was now bathed in the soft glow of peace. No longer bound by the past, they were free to walk forward, into the unknown, but this time, with the certainty that the journey ahead would be shaped not by the burdens of old wounds, but by the strength they had found in each other. In the quiet of the night, with the stars beginning to fill the sky above, John understood that peace is not the absence of pain, but the ability to face it and accept it. It is the journey of rediscovering oneself with each step, when we are no longer controlled by the past, when we learn to forgive ourselves and others. Peace comes from leaving behind the burdens, allowing the heart to be free and light, and moving forward into the future with the firm belief that each new day brings the opportunity for healing and renewal.